I am Becky Gitlin, the incoming District Rotaract Chair and outgoing District Rotaract Representative, and I am part of the LEDS team running today. Thank you for joining us. This is our first virtual LEDS, formerly LETS, and some quick notes before we begin. I will be your moderator for this session, and you will all have been muted on entering the session, so if you would like to speak, please raise your hand, which you will find in the participants section. When appropriate, I as the moderator will unmute you. When the session begins, it will be recorded. So if you are uncomfortable with this, please feel free to turn off your camera, but the chat function is enabled and please feel free to use it to ask questions, as we will be open to discussion at different points throughout this section. This session will now be recorded and I would like to introduce our facilitators, Kai and Alan.
Wonderful, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Kai Hacker and I'm I guess the incoming DG's treasurer. Real pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to all of you today, and helping me through this will be someone with a much more vast level of experience in what it means to be a treasurer within the Rotary community. So Alan Oz will be helping out as well. Alan, did you want to say a few words before we kicked off? From outside the library in Whitianga.
Yes, greetings from sunny Whitianga, where I can get some internet connection. So I've flicked through the screen and say good afternoon to you all. Some faces I know, some I don't. And we are a very diverse group. I would imagine that we've got President-elects online, that we will have treasurers online, and I see some district leaders. I think it's important that we also recognise that some will be brand new to the roles that they're going to take on, and some will be seasoned veterans. It's also great to recognise that we have people from the Pacific Islands as well as from Auckland. So I think you can see that in the 45 minutes that we have allocated for this, this is not going to be a how to do it session as a club treasurer and dealing with club finances. And certainly Kai and I aren't claiming to be experts on every last subject. So what we'll be doing is introducing what we believe are a number of key points and hopefully be able to get some discussion going, or at least respond to some of the questions. Likewise, we won't be expecting to provide detailed answers to all of those questions. Rather, they are being recorded, and over the next week or whatever, we will endeavour to put together a Q&A session that can be circulated and used as a resource document for everybody. And in that regard, at the end of this presentation, we'll bring up a number of resources. Some of those are from the My Learning sections on the RI website, and a very helpful 13-page document from Bruce Howe, who's part of the district finance team. So I'll hand back to you now, Kai.
Fantastic, thank you, Alan. Yeah, look, one of the key things here, and it sounds like the last couple sessions were pretty interactive, is we'll bring up some concepts and some high-level, I guess, points that we thought would be valuable to get across. But I'm really hoping that people on the call will join in here, and both in chat and also by taking yourself off mute, ask questions. But also, I imagine that there's people on this call with significantly more experience than I have, for instance, in what it means to be a club treasurer and to effectively manage the finances of your club. So if there are things that you'd like to share or things that you've experienced that you think would be valuable to put across, please do jump in. After each little slide and section, we've got a time to do that. So I guess at a high level, when we talk to the club leadership and what that means in regards to managing your club's finances effectively, I guess there's a number of key aspects that need to be taken into account refinances. So that the club's finances itself, if there's a charitable trust that's separate to the club, the trust and managing the finances of the trust, different taxation issues, issues around incorporated societies, charities, and then there's obviously district finances, and that has an effect on clubs, Rotary International finances, and foundation finances, and all of those play a part into managing your club's finances effectively. I think while it is the whole leadership of a club's responsibility to make sure that the finances are managed prudently, the treasurer obviously takes a key role in doing that, but also ensuring stewardship across the entire club leadership team. I think it's also important to point out here that while the treasurer has a specific term, the treasurer's role really begins before that term starts, throughout the entire term, and then afterwards as well, making sure that there's an effective handover to whoever is coming through after the treasurer's term finishes. So this is I guess our first piece around discussion. It'd be wonderful to hear from some of you who have experience in this. How have you in the past best ensured that the club president and the board are aware of their finance governance responsibilities, and how do you as a treasurer or the leadership team, I guess, manage that effectively? It'd be wonderful to hear some examples from people. So please do now either you can raise your hand by clicking the raise your hand button, or feel free to just take yourself off mute. If you're more comfortable using the chat, please go ahead and type something into the chat box.
I think am I unmuted, Kai?
You are unmuted, yes, but also
Yeah.
I think we just had a hand up from Deepak as well.
Okay, well, let's start with Deepak.
All right, Deepak, you'll have to take yourself off mute.
Okay.
There we are, you're good.
Yep. Okay. I've been a treasurer for I think about 2 or 3 terms now. The general thing is that most directors sort of leave things to you for most of the finance stuff. We have a number of committees who look after major fundraisers. Generally, the responsibility for all their fundraising financial stuff is actually handed over to the committee. The treasurer then takes over once they've finished and see if everything's sort of tied up, and then I put it into our system. So we have separate accounts for each of the big fundraisers that we normally have every year. And for any grants, we obviously have to have a separate account. Generally, it's always been that the treasurer is the guy who keeps things under wraps, and in terms of reporting and all that sort of stuff.
Right, gotcha. I think that's a really important piece, Deepak, is that to try to manage everything that has to do with club finances by yourself would be a huge piece of work, and it's important to make sure that you're sharing the load of that, right? But still, you need someone in that position to make sure that it's all tidied up at the end, and that the compliance is being managed. Yeah. Thank you. Vidinand, have you got something to share?
Yeah, I haven't been a treasurer, but we have a number of fundraising events, big fundraising events. So what we do is appoint a treasurer, like Deepak says, for each of the events to finalize the account before it's handed over to the treasurer. And I think it has always worked well for us, and so the treasurer is not accountable for any mishaps that may have happened. But yeah, I think it has worked well. But we've already had a meeting between the last treasurer and the present treasurer. We've already worked out our plans for the year, expenditure for the year, and the whole financial organization for this coming year. So yeah, we've done that already, and I think it helps if you pre-plan.
Yeah, absolutely, good point. I think someone else raised their hand on click the raise hand button.
Yes, we have Peter Paulson.
Peter Paulson.
Are you?
Hi. Yes, finance is always a challenging part of Rotary, particularly in the different settings in the Pacific where financial management is a little more fluid. So some of the things we've put in place is that there should be a receipt for everything, like when we do something during a meeting, like collecting money, there always is a receipt written, so it's always recorded. We found that in the past, petty cash wasn't always managed quite so well. We also request monthly reports from the treasurer. We don't have a large amount of finance, but it just means it puts a little bit of reminder that we do it every month rather than letting it sort of slip, as can happen very easily. Double check signing and things like that as well. But it is something that the whole club needs to work with the treasurer and with new members to collectively support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that doesn't need to be a huge amount of work, but if you get behind on it, it gets more and more difficult. So continue to do that, everything on a monthly basis, and as it happens, I think there's huge value in that. Deepak, you had something else to add?
Yeah, just a point. I'd be interested to find out how many of the clubs actually get themselves audited at the, like the financials for the year. Is there a requirement or?
Yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is that there is not a requirement, at least Rotary does not have a requirement that every club has their finances audited. However, I believe there is a requirement to have your finances independently reviewed at the end of the year. Alan, do you have better understand that? Oh, I think you're muted at the moment. Sorry. Let's unmute you.
Is that better?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's better.
okay. And my understanding, it's down to the bylaws of your particular club, Deepak. But there is a point later on in the presentation which we'll come to. But to give you a personal view, I believe that any organisation that we're involved in with a leadership responsibility, we should have the finances at least independently reviewed. Most of us on the call will be aware now of the challenges and the cost of having that formally audited. But to have an independent review, I believe, is not only important for the organisation, but also for those who are leaders of the club, in particular the treasurer, because nobody wants a question raised 5 years down the track as to, was this done correctly or wasn't it? Was all the money accounted for? Wasn't it? And I think Peter's comments a few minutes ago were very valuable there, that there is a well-documented trail. And to have somebody, while that trail is fresh, to independently review and just give a report of comfort to the board, I consider to be essential. But in terms of the formalities, I think there's now an openness with regard to whatever the bylaws for the club record. But if the recorder for the meeting can please note that, and we'll check that point out and give a formal response.
Thank you, Alan. There's been a comment here from Erica Lee and Carl, and also one Craig messaged through, talking about signatories. So account signatories, whether you have a single signatory or whether you need dual authorization, and then changing signatories on accounts while treasurers come and go. And I guess getting that handover and making sure that that's effective. I guess it'd be great to hear from people here where they have seen that handover, including changing of a signatories, work well, and what good looked like in that sense. Does anyone have a good handover story and process that they can share? Deepak, you're. I saw a hand go up there. Oh, you're muted.
So I've the problem that I've seen is that when you have a handover, then you have to have got all these signatures, authorizations, getting the bank sorted out. It does take a while. So it needs somebody with a bit of persistence to get all those forms sorted out, And it takes a little while. What we have done is I've actually just kept about 6 signatories on and left it at that. I will not actually keep changing it. People who've been on our club for a little while. So anybody needs to get checks signed. These guys are reasonably available. They're in the city. Our city is not very big. So, it's just a 5-minute walk or something like that, usually within the city to get a signature. So I found that a little bit more practical than every year having to do all that stuff. And then if it gets left out or somebody doesn't do it, then the problem is you don't actually have somebody who can sign for you, etc., etc. The people traveling and not being available, all that sort of stuff gives you a lot of headache. I used to have that some time ago, but we've got certain accounts and we have check signatories, the same check signatories across all the accounts.
Right. And do you have dual authorization, Deepak, for all that?
Two signatories for each check.
Right. And that makes sense. That way you haven't got this sort of, single point of failure if one person is not available or leaves town or has to go away for work.
The next person who signs will need to make sure that the documentation is over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you don't sign, if you don't see enough documentation or trail.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Lovely. Hey, I'm going to skip us forward to the next topic here, but that's been a really good discussion. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in that. Club structure. So this is an interesting one. All 9920 NZ-based clubs, and I'm unsure about the Pacific Island clubs, are incorporated societies rather than being charitable entities. Many are registered for GST. If they create an income, it's a taxable income generally. So NZ-based clubs should be donating their assessable income to a registered charity. Many clubs also have a charitable trust that is affiliated with the club itself, but it is a completely separate entity with trustees, etc. Trustees obviously can be personally liable, and as such, trusts should not be the ones running the events. Clubs should be. I think it'd be really interesting to hear how you clubs that have a club and a trust, how we make sure that have that separation, both in terms of how we conduct our business, but also in terms of what hats we're wearing when we're making decisions, etc. Is there anyone who, I guess, has some formal structures in place or some informal structures in terms of how they manage their trust finances versus their club finances?
I can ask you a question. Normally, in a situation like our trusts, at the end of the year, you have under $1,000 and the rest of the money goes into the trust to avoid taxation. Is that the procedure or in New Zealand operations?
Yes, that's my understanding. Alan, do you want to jump in on how your club manages this?
Yeah, absolutely. That unless the money that has been raised by a club that is deemed to be accessible, and generally where a project's involved and they're carried out with the intention of making a profit, that money will be taxable unless it's donated to an appropriately registered entity. And certainly for most of the New Zealand clubs, that will involve transferring that money to their own charitable trust, and from there it can be dispersed. And that's the base of the point that Kai's leading us through here now, that you're quite right to the person who asked the question, that needs to be done before the end of the financial year. There's certain timetables around that. Otherwise, very much the club can be liable for taxation on those amounts. And that's something that all club leaders be very, very mindful of, bearing in mind that those who are club treasurers on the call, and this perhaps comes up in a later slide, but you need to be quite clear as to whether your role is just as the club treasurer or whether you're both the club treasurer and the trust treasurer, and that you know quite clearly which role that you are carrying out.
Yeah, Alan, that's a really good point. My understanding is for some clubs, the leadership is the same across the two, but other clubs divide up those duties, don't they?
Yeah, we divide it up. Our trust is different from our club treasurer, but they work together towards the end of the year to see that it works out together. Now, one of the questions you raised was, or one of the answers you raised was that the financials should be worked with the club rather than through the trust, you said, when you're doing club activities. Is that right? Or can it all go through the trust and operates through the trust?
There's certainly in New Zealand, our clear advice is that the club undertakes those activities because in New Zealand, the club is an incorporated society, which gives limitations on liabilities, and there's no, all things being equal, there's no liabilities that transfer to members. If activities are carried on within a trust, which does not have limited liabilities, and for whatever reason there was a legal issue raised or a damages issue raised, then potentially that liability can come back on the trustees. So quite clearly within New Zealand, and I would imagine it would be a similar structure for various Pacific islands, please make sure that you carry out the physical activities under the guidance, under the auspices of the incorporated society or club, and then donate your funds from a financial point of view, the resulting profit from that to the trust.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
Right. And Deepak.
Yep. This, there's a document that Bruce Howie has produced. It's called Rotary Club Compliance Tax Issues.
Yes, correct. Yes.
It's generally a New Zealand based document. It's something I think it doesn't apply completely to us in Fiji, but all the New Zealand clubs would probably be a reasonably this background. This makes it disappear, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, Deepak. That's one of the documents that will link to at the end, because we're not getting into a lot of the heavy detail over this session today. But the document that Bruce has produced for New Zealand clubs is pretty comprehensive around a lot of the I guess, compliance and taxation issues. And we'll have some levels of detail that'll, I think, be really valuable to most people. So I definitely recommend that you do read that. Peter on the chat here mentioned that in Tonga, the club is a registered NGO, which looks like it might make things pretty easy in terms of no tax, no GST, no duty, etc. So that's quite handy.
Yeah. Just it might be useful for those from New Zealand clubs that life changed in 2008. Prior to that, there was some sort of an assumption, rightly or wrongly, that Rotary clubs were charities. But with the new legislation, charities legislation in 2008, all of that changed. And it just wasn't possible to meet the Rotary International requirements plus the New Zealand charitable requirements and continue to run with the single entity of clubs. Hence the formation then and continuation for most clubs within 9920 to have a charitable trust.
Nice. All right. I'm going to jump on to the next section here. Treasurer responsibilities. So getting into the nitty gritty, I guess, a little bit more in terms of what the role of treasurer means. I guess firstly, if you're new to the role, please make sure that you really do get a debrief and handover. And we talked on this a little bit before, but make sure that you make time, and I'd suggest multiple sessions over a course of maybe 2 to 3 weeks for a handover. Really understand the importance in that. Get an understanding of how to use the systems and what the processes are. Make sure that you build relationships with the president, secretary, and the board. Also, if you aren't the trust treasurer, make sure that you meet the trust treasurer and learn about how you're working together. And if you are also the trust treasurer, make sure that you're aware that it is a different hat and you'll have different, priorities based on and different frames to make decisions with, depending on which hat you're wearing. One of the jobs of treasurer, obviously, is making sure that invoicing and collecting of all monies due is either managed by yourself or has been delegated to someone who understands that it's been delegated to them. It's still your responsibility, so that's something key to manage. Also, obviously, setting up payments out of the banks. Your responsibility, so make sure that there's adequate documentation and that the outgoing treasurer has taught you how to do that. Insist on dual signatories. Most of you should already have that set up. If you are in your role now or taking over the role and you're finding that you don't have dual signatories, it really is an important aspect of the financial governance. Another role of the treasurer is to provide monthly finance reports to the board. And ensure that profits from fundraising activities are donated to either the club's trust or, if you don't have one, a different charitable trust. At the end of the financial year, you're responsible for ensuring that the annual accounts have been prepared and reviewed or audited as your bylaws state, and then also making sure that you stay compliant with tax and any other returns, such as your company's office annual return if there's a limited liability business, and any other pieces for the charity and any other returns required. Cool. Any questions, comments on treasurer responsibilities or views on how you've managed that in your clubs or seen that managed, where potentially some of those responsibilities have been shared? Or
Kai, just on that last slide and picking up on Deepak's comment about having some extra signatories, for those countries that have anti-money laundering laws like we do in New Zealand, it's always, I think Deepak's suggestion is right on the money, because it's just taking longer and longer to get any signatories approved. You're often dealing with a requirement to submit copies of passports and all that sort of thing. So if you've got, as Deepak has said, a group of 5 or 6 signatories, that also helps if you've got an issue of getting a new signatory sorted, because as we all know, in New Zealand, the AML, the anti-money laundering requirements are very, very onerous and can take quite a long time to get a new signatory established. So thank you both on raising that in several different aspects. So it's an important issue.
yeah,
Can I just come in here as well, talking about the dual signatories? I mean, checks are almost a thing of the past, so it'd be interesting to know how many clubs are now set up, with tokens, etc., for dual signatories online. But where checks are still being used, I believe it's extremely important that as a treasurer, you don't in any way operate the let's sign a blank check and somebody else will sign it and get on with it. I have absolutely refused and continue to do so, not that I have many checks put in front of me now, to sign a blank check. I don't believe it's fair to me, and I don't believe it's fair to the second signatory coming along. So I'm a very strong personal opinion here that if you're using paper documentation, you're using checks, that don't sign a blank check. And if you're asked to be the second signatory on one that's already signed, well, once again, I refuse to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. Vidyanand, have you got something? And Deepak, both of you.
I've got a question about returns. I believe at the moment, the 31st of September or March has been our returns, but I believe we should be doing our returns at the end of June, and we have to write specifically to the Inland Revenue to get permission to defer the payment. Now, can that not become a permanent fixture in our rotary system rather than asking for permission to extend that time? Especially with these backdated returns from 2008 to when a lot of clubs had not done the returns, and now there's a demand to do that. We all have asked, we've written to Inland Revenue to ask if we can get an extension until June, until 31st of June. So is there a possibility they could work on it rather than ask for permission?
Is this a New Zealand club?
Yeah, New Zealand club.
Yeah, if you can email me or Bruce later, because Bruce has done work with the Inland Revenue Department on that.
Okay.
We thought that all New Zealand clubs had been standardised, but we do have contacts within the Inland Revenue to help smooth these things through, because it is a complicated matter, and we have found over the years that you don't necessarily get the same response from different IRD officers, both in terms of location and people. So if you want to email me, yeah, we'll certainly work with Bruce Howe and see if we can help you through this one.
Oh, Bruce Howe, yeah, he's the present treasurer, isn't it?
Yeah, district treasurer. Yes.
Yeah, we're working with him anyway at the moment.
Okay. If
Yeah.
you're working with Bruce, you're getting good advice. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in good hands then.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
Nice. Deepak, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, no, this is for the Fiji Rotary Club. The Fiji scene at the moment in terms of registration is a little in flux at the moment. We were the well, I don't know, even to this date, I feel that we are the only club that actually legally registered club. We registered under the Charitable Trusts Act. We don't have any Clubs Act or incorporated, all that sort of stuff, you know, the ink thing that you people put at the end of the club. That sort of stuff's not available yet. So we're registered as a charitable trust, and we fall under the legislation, the Charitable Trusts Act, which is a pretty older act.
And Deepak, it's Craig here. Have you got your balance date for returns set to 30 June? Because that's what we were talking about earlier, not having different accounting years. Are you able to file as at the 30th of June rather than the 31st of March?
The charitable trusts are actually exempt, so we don't have any filing requirements here.
Oh, we might move a few activities into Fiji then.
Tax haven.
Right, wonderful.
Gotcha. There's a message here from Erica saying some other clubs are having difficulties registering as trusts in Fiji.
Yeah. Yes.
I guess my thought there is, Erica, if you want to connect with Deepak and see how they manage to do it, he might have some advice, some wisdom, or some people to call.
Erica doesn't need to go too far. She's got a lawyer in-house.
Nice. Nice. Any other questions from anyone on, I guess, treasurer's responsibilities? Probably this is particularly for incoming treasurers or, you know, incoming other club leadership and wanting to understand specifics around that. If not, we can move on to the next section. All right, we'll move forward. All right, levies. So Rotary International and 9920 district levies. Rotary International dues are US $68, and they're billed to clubs twice a year, July and January. Something to be mindful of as you as a treasurer and club leadership are setting your club dues is needing to bill enough in your budget to handle both the Rotary International dues as well as the Rotary Down Under magazine, which is Aussie $40, again, billed in 2 halves. And that is mandatory, as my understanding, whether you want the magazine or not, it's coming. So making sure that your club members are charged for that accordingly. And then the district levy, which I think is still subject to approval at the AGM, but is looking likely to be 55 NZ plus just for New Zealand-based clubs and 45 NZ for Pacific Island clubs, and it will be billed all at once in August. There is also, for the first time ever, a small Rotaractor district levy, which will be $8 plus just in New Zealand, and $5 without any just in the Pacific Islands. So I guess just the call out here, RDU online subscription is $35. There we go. We just saved you all $5. Thank you, Craig. And so really this is just calling this out to make sure that as you're preparing your club budgets for the year, you're taking into account what we've been talking about as we did the district budget, total cost of membership. And that, you know, there's the monies required to run your club on a club level, but then there's also the Rotary International, there's the district aspects, and there's the magazine that keeps us all connected.
Yeah, Kai, I'm glad that Craig put up about the online version, which is going to be a new option for next year. And as you were talking through that, I realized we hadn't included that in the slide. So we'll circulate this information to everybody on the call shortly.
Yeah.
Crystal's got a hand raised. Is that a question, Crystal? If you want to unmute.
Oh, hi. Thank you. I raised this issue, and this probably isn't the platform for it. In regards to dues in the Pacific Islands, we're in a position where we're going to lose members actually this year at a high level because they can't pay their dues because we don't have a rich club. And so, you know, we're in a position where we have to decide how we're going to subsidize either to keep these members or not, and just putting out there whether there was any chatter out there in the district zone RI about assisting with dues. Maybe that's not the right terminology, but anyway, just wanted to make that comment. Yeah,
thank you, Crystal. Look, it's something that we were, I guess, quite mindful of trying to figure out what to set the dues at this year. Obviously, the Rotary International dues are something that at a district level we really don't have any control over. But we did bring down dues for the district as much as we could, and you know, not run too heavy of a deficit. In terms of, I guess, subsidization or help with that, it's not something that I've been across. But Craig or Alan, do you know if there's any, I guess, avenues for getting RI help for clubs that might need it, or what that looks like?
Right. In terms of RI, no. In fact, all the district governor-elects and the district governors were on a conference call with Mark Maloney and Holger Knack, and the big issue in terms of reducing dues was front and center. A lot of discussion. At the end, Rotary's expecting a membership loss. They took a huge hit over cancelling the convention in Honolulu, and at the same time, there is a lot of reorganization going on in Rotary International with the Learning Centre and those sort of initiatives. So they were sort of a bit between a rock and a hard place. They're trying to absorb the losses, which were many, many millions of dollars of having to cancel, not just the Honolulu RI convention, but other events as well. So the basic approach was, well, we understand it's going to be very tough, and in particular, they're pretty concerned about America because, as we all know, 14 million unemployed. Sort of out of nowhere from COVID. So it's going to be one of those things where we have to just see how it goes. We're very conscious of the same situation for the Pacifica clubs, and it may very well be that we have to look at perhaps doing something specific to help clubs. We did set up a fund for Rotarians in distress. I haven't got the current balance on that fund, but in fact, actually, there were some quite generous donations made to that fund, and that is a possible source of a little bit of money for subsidizing Rotarian who want to stay on, want to contribute, but the dues are a real problem. So look, I think the answer there is, please get those issues in front of us. We are, as I said, expecting not only worldwide, but also within the district, a slight fall in membership. And anything that we can do to, to make that easier. I mean, one of the ways that you might want to do is to think about setting up a Rotaract club and having some of your members within the Rotaract club. As Becky could and the Fijian team could attest, we've got some very strong activity in some of the Rotaract clubs where essentially they're not able to afford the cost that comes from the total cost of membership from being a Rotarian. So look, I don't know whether anybody wants to, from the Fijian team, or Becky, you want to make a comment on Rotaract's role in providing a new brand where we can keep people. But the offer that has been made by me is, if you are worried about your own membership, drop us a note, because we obviously want to do everything we can to make that possible for us to get through this next 12 to 24 months.
If I'm not mistaken, we still have a Lautoka club for Rotaract in Fiji. It's not currently active, but it is something that we could look into getting active again. So that is a potential option. And Crystal, please feel free to just email me on that one. But I did notice that we have Peter's hand up as well.
Yeah, we do. It is, we're just looking at it, trying to revive it, but that may be, anyway, it's a big discussion for us. And I just thank you for mentioning what you have, because it gives me a better framework.
Nice. There's also a comment here from Helene saying that in Tabauni that they fundraised specifically for this, and it sounds like that was successful.
Yeah, Kai, can I just come in there? I've just read that as well. I think it's the second part of Helene's note that's extremely important for this call, and that is we have to be very, very careful not to mix charitable funds with funds for operating the club, which are what club membership dues are all about. And so what Helene's added here, that the money that they've raised is quite clearly being shown to the people that they've been involved in the fundraising and where the funds have come from, that it is for club membership.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
that's
appreciate
something we're looking
Crystal.
at too.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, the whole point up, Crystal, because yes, it's going to take on a new intensity, but this is a situation from district point of view we've been aware of before with disparities of incomes. Yeah, and it's a Rotary International issue right around the world, which is very much Rotary International, very much US dollar centric. And it is a matter that has been discussed at the Rotary Zone level before, without any conclusion having been reached. So it is good that you've raised it, because it's something there that, as Craig said, we can keep talking about. So where the specific incidences where individual memberships are at threat, it would be good to have those recorded and sent through.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. There's a message here from Rotaract Suva as well. So majority of members are students or unemployed. So we work with other systems where members with the means to pay do for those who can't. But I think the point around COVID-19, and we're entering what's probably going to be one of the hardest economic times that I've seen in my working life, and it's likely to be a topic of conversation at a district level, at a Rotary International level. How do we make sure that we support Rotarians through this and come out the other side still strong? So I don't think we have any specific, I guess, decisions haven't been made, but I'm sure conversations are happening around that.
I'm just going to have to slide in here as we are getting close to our time, but we do have Peter's hand up as well. Was there a comment from Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Since all three of my clubs made exactly the same comments, I just feel it's responsible for me to report that as well. And I suspect we're going to see a lot more Rotaract movements in future. The idea of another club in Tonga, should that go ahead, I think Rotaract is far more likely than a Rotary Club too.
Yeah.
And again, as Rotaract Chair, happy to help. Just reach out.
Thanks, Becky.
Thanks.
So look, we are running out of time here. There's some really good resources that we've compiled here, and would really suggest that whether you're a treasurer or part of the leadership of your club, go and read through these. None of them are particularly long, and most of them are pretty easy to read and understand and digest. There's one there specifically by Bruce that gets into another level of detail, and I think hugely valuable. So what's the best way to get these links out to everyone?
I think if we put together the Q&A and points that have come out of this, Kai, and circulate it quickly, in terms of the first one on the list there, Bruce Howe's document, we will circulate an e-copy of that document, but all club presidents, and it may have even been secretaries and treasurers, were circulated this from the district secretary, Mark, within the last 2 to 3 weeks to help with the year end. So it's already within your club, but we will circulate you another copy plus the links to these other RI learning resources.
Yeah.
If somebody can get me a copy of the presentation, I'll put it up on Club Runner as well as a resource.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'll email you that tonight or tomorrow, John. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, that brings us to the end of time and the end of the presentation. I guess big thank you from my side for engaging in conversation and sharing stories and asking good questions. It would have been a much more difficult session to fill if it had just been my voice floating through the whole time. So whether you're a returning club leadership member, or you're new to the role, I wish you all the best with the coming year, and yeah, hopefully get a chance to work with all of you further.
Excellent, and I'll just close, Kai, by thanking you very much for leading through that session. And you will have the email addresses from Kai, Bruce, and myself, and or phone numbers. Please don't hesitate to give us a call if we can help in any way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alan and Kai, for being our facilitators here this afternoon. And I'm just going to pass it on to Edith for a moment, as she can give you a few more details about the last session that we have happening after this.
Yeah, thank you, Alan and Kai, and what dedication that was to be delivering from the car. So as you can see, we can do things differently in 9920, and the innovation is already there. So another great session for us to have food for thought, and obviously to really be setting your clubs up for success for 2020-21. We're going to make sure, if you can have a look at that URL around the evaluation first and foremost. If you download that for each session, would be great. Once you've downloaded it once, you can pass that on. And the wrap for the next session's there. We just like some feedback and final thoughts. So we have 42 on Zoom right now with us. Don't leave us too soon. We've got another 10 minutes or so to wrap up, and we'd love to have your feed in and feedback. So